The purpose of this conference, as I understand it, is to find the soul of Europe. I don't think we have far to look. To my mind, Europe, the spirit of Europe, is that of the open society. And the mission of Europe is to serve as a prototype for a global open society. Let me explain what I mean. The concept of open society was first used by the French philosopher Henri Bergson in his book, The Two Sources of Morality and Religion, published in 1932. One source is tribal, and that leads to a closed society whose members feel an affinity for each other and fear and hostility towards the other tribes. By contrast, the other source is universal, and it leads to an open society which is guided by universal human rights and seeks to protect and promote the freedom of the individual. This scheme was modified by Karl Popper in his seminal book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, published in 1944. He pointed out that open society can be endangered by abstract universal ideologies like communism and fascism, which claim to be in possession of the ultimate truth. Popper was a philosopher of science, and he argued that the ultimate truth is beyond the reach of the human intellect. Even scientific theories can't be verified beyond doubt. They can only be falsified. And it is only the fact that they can be falsified that qualifies them as scientific. We can't base our decisions on knowledge, and our imperfect understanding introduces an element of uncertainty into the world in which we live that is very difficult to cope with. Ideologies like communism and fascism seek to eliminate the uncertainty, but they suffer from a fatal flaw. They are bound to be false and misleading exactly because they claim to be in possession of the ultimate truth. They can be imposed on society only by repression. By contrast, an open society accepts the uncertainties inherent in our imperfect understanding and seeks to establish laws and institutions which allow people with divergent views and interests to live together in peace. The distinguishing feature of these laws and institutions is that they guarantee the freedom of the individual. The Second World War resulted in the defeat of the Nazi regime and its ideology. Europe was rebuilt with the generous help of the United States, and eventually a process leading to the formation of the European Union was set in motion. The European Union embodies the principles of open society to a remarkable extent, although these principles have not been enshrined in a constitution. And even this may be appropriate to an open society because, as Karl Popper argued, our imperfect understanding doesn't permit permanent and eternally valid definitions of social arrangements. The arrangements must reflect the will of the participants, and they must be open to adjustment and improvement. Accordingly, he refused to provide a definition of open society. Nevertheless, the European Union consists of an evolving body of laws and institutions which meet the requirements of an open society. They allow people of divergent views and interests to live together in peace. Only democratic, open societies are allowed to belong to the European Union, and no nationality occupies a controlling position. The European Union was brought into existence by a process of piecemeal social engineering, the method Karl Popper considered appropriate to an open society. The process was directed by a far-sighted and purposeful elite, which recognized that perfection is unattainable. It proceeded step by step, setting limited objectives with limited timetables, knowing full well that each step will prove to be inadequate and require a further step. The process was helped along first by the threat from the Soviet Union and then by the globalization of the economy, which tended to favor larger economic units. That's how the European Union was constructed, one step at a time. The process has now ground to a halt. The European Constitution, which may have been in any case an over-ambitious step, was defeated by the referenda held in France and the Netherlands. The Union is now left in an untenable condition with an enlarged membership of 27 and a governing structure that was originally designed for 6, although it managed to function for 15. The political will to keep the process moving forward has eroded. The memory of past wars has faded, and the threat posed by the Soviet Union has disappeared. The prevailing arrangements are far too cumbersome, and unless the forward momentum can be regained, the dissatisfaction with the present state of affairs is liable to generate momentum in the opposite direction. And that is already happening. Nationalist, xenophobic, anti-Muslim sentiments are on the rise, aggravated by the failure to integrate immigrant communities. The situation is all the more disturbing because the disarray within the European Union is matched by the disarray in the world order. The United States used to be the dominant power in the world. It used to set the agenda for the world. But after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, President Bush declared war on terror, and that was the wrong agenda, executed the wrong way. As a result, the United States has lost power and influence in an unprecedented way and is no longer in a position to set the agenda for the world. There are other players who have their own agenda: Iran, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela, to mention only the most conspicuous. The United States is no longer able to project overwhelming military power in any part of the world, as it was when President Bush announced the Bush Doctrine. And as a result, the world order has become much less stable. Indeed, it is threatening to descend into a world disorder. The proper role for the United States would be to lead the world in a cooperative effort to deal with the problems that confront humanity and can be dealt with only by greater international cooperation, such as the threats posed by rogue regimes, the breakdown of the nuclear non-proliferation regime, climate change, and the need to maintain stability in the global economic system and reduce poverty. In the past, the United States served as the leader of the free world. After the Second World War, it used its power and influence to establish the United Nations and the Bretton Woods institutions and the Marshall Plan.